break. If you have just joined the call, you're very welcome. My name is Sinead and I am delighted to be hosting, I think, episode 16 of In Conversation With, and this is part 2. So at 4 o'clock, we were joined by the lovely Deirdre Croghan, who was able to talk to us about the Bachelor of Education for Post-Primary to teach Gaeilge with French, German or Spanish. And now, in just a second time, I will add Fergal McGurk into the call, who is a graduate of Actuarial Maths in DCU. So just before we get started, as I said, for anyone who's just joined the call, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your kind of Zoom tab there. And if you have any questions for Fergal as we have our conversation, please do let us know and we'll make sure to cover it. So without wasting any more time, I will promote Fergal to a panelist and we can get started. Hopefully this worked. It's loading now. Give it another second.
Hello, sorry.
Fergal, how are you? You gave me a fright there. I thought you legged it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Just as soon as you said I'm gonna let Fergal join now, it was like, okay, let's just turn it off and come back in for some reason. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you keeping yourself?
Oh, grand, yeah. Just done work
Just
there, so busy time,
I know. I think we're all flat out, even with the pandemic. No rest for the wicked. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and your busy work day to kind of finish up your day with us in DCU. It's great to have a graduate come back and be able to give some very valuable insights. So we have a lot of people on the call at the minute who have an interest in actuarial maths. So hopefully we'll have loads of questions for you, Fergal. I suppose if we take it right back, and maybe we'll work then in chronological order.
Yeah.
6th year Fergal, where was he? What was he thinking in terms of CAO and what path to take?
God, good question. Jesus, that's a long time ago. Yeah, like at the time, I really enjoyed business and maths in secondary school. So, in fact, my first choice was actually to do global business, actually in DCU. I think it was USA because I was told you get to go to USA for the 2 years. So at the time, I was like, oh my God, I want to go USA for 2 years. Then didn't actually get the points for there, but I got DCU Actuarial Mathematics, which was my second choice, I think. Yeah, nearly certain anyway. But it was always my plan to come to DCU, if that makes sense. I think like my first 5 to 6 choices was a DCU related one, and then like the other actuarial maths like that can be done in like the other colleges were like my 6th to 10th choice. So no, yeah, it was always like the DCU. My brother went to DCU. I don't know about you, but like when you had to do like Romeo and Juliet or King Lear or something for the English, you're always brought up to the Helix and made sit through that for 3 hours. So I always like DCU was like the one college I knew of, and being from Monaghan is like on the easy side of the motorway, so it's very easy to get to. So that was one of the main reasons. But yeah, no, it was I wanted to do something with business / maths, and I didn't want to be a maths teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher, if that makes sense. So, and then what else can you do with maths? And like in all fairness, like before I came to DCU, if you had asked me what actuarial or what an actuary was, I wouldn't have a clue. I just wanted to do it because I knew it was maths related, if that makes sense. And to be honest with you, until you could nearly ask me now what an actuary is, and I could give you a different answer every time, if you know what I mean. So it's definitely a very broad range thing, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's where I was, and I was very glad and happy then to actually get into it, because when I actually got into college and I got talking to a few business students, I realized business wasn't for me actually, and the maths route of it was my way. So I was actually very happy that I didn't get my first choice and end up taking like one of the lower choices. Like so.
Yeah, it's great to hear. It's great to hear that it worked out, and even to hear like the kind of motivations behind it, because like, you know, as you mentioned, there's so many things that go into it in terms of transport and location and the feel of the college. Like the vibe is always something you hear coming up at DCU. Like there's something about the energy in it that a lot of students like, and they're all very important elements that come into it when picking a university. It's not just the course, you know, clubs and societies and anything like that. But if we do try and answer that difficult question, Fergal, of what is an actuary? Like, what is actuarial maths? How would you kind of pitch that to someone who's never heard of it before?
Yeah. I was actually thinking about this before. This was like I was planning an answer, but there's definitely like, so the two words are like quite separate and yet to combine together, if that makes sense. So like obviously the maths end of it is pretty obvious for anyone who does maths. You need to be very, very good at maths. You need to uh, I wouldn't say you don't need to enjoy maths, but you definitely need to have an interest in it, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have to
Mm,
like it, but you got to be like, oh, that's actually kind of cool when you figure something out. Like, oh, that's actually kind of cool that you can do that with maths.
mm.
But like, you don't have to be like a big maths nerd, if that makes sense. Happens out that I am a big maths nerd, so it worked out for me. Like, you definitely need to like be comfortable with maths and that you're happy to do it. And then the actuary is, I always try and say it in a really harsh way, but basically, like, if you were to sum it up, most actuaries are trying to figure out when someone's going to die and how much money we have to pay them, basically, if that makes sense. It's a very crude way of putting it, but it's basically to do with risk. So anything where there's a risk involved and risk and money, an actuary would come in. So if you know what I mean, so if you are investing into certain areas, the actuary would come in and you'd be like, how much money does the business have to make sure if the investments go poorly that they can still pay people back? Or again, like the life insurance where I'm working right now, it's like you're trying to figure out like what products do I need, does customers want, and like how, so like basically like for a pension, if you know what I mean. So like,
Mm.
okay, so they want a pension when they're 65. But in a few years' time, we're all living longer. You might actually not want a pension until you're 70. And then how long are you going to live after that? So you're trying to make sure that person has enough money and the company has enough money to pay it. So like, that's a very specific example, but like you can go into anything. You can go into general insurance, anything to do with money, and anything to do with risk, which is basically anything an actuary can do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of putting it, and some great examples there for students who are kind of considering taking that path to kind of, okay, I know I can go into this or whatever area. So, for if we were to look at kind of the 4 year long course, what sort of
Yeah.
things are you learning in first year, and where do you end up then in fourth year?
Yeah, so it's definitely, I would definitely say like the first year and a half, maybe even the first 2 years, are very much like the maths part of the side of it, if that makes sense. So you really have to learn the fundamentals of maths. So like in the first semester, first year, like on the maths end of it, you're really fine tuning the maths you've already learned in leaving cert. Everybody needs to be up to a very certain level. In all fairness, you do need, I mean, well, it's different now. Like for my leaving cert, you had to have a B3 or higher, so whatever that is, and I think
Yeah,
that's a H.
I believe it's a H3 at the minute.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
so
quite a
like
high level.
yeah, so you do need a good competency in it. So basically, the first year is definitely like fine tune your maths, and like you're starting then to progress into probability and statistics quite an awful lot. You do probability and statistics throughout your 4 years. That's basically a lot of the work is probability and statistics, and then you're also getting introduced to computer coding. So I wouldn't say you're definitely not like developing apps or stuff like that, but you're definitely like going into the area of you need to understand how to bring data together, and that's how you do it through coding. So in the two main things I'd say in first year would be a good development of your coding skills, which is I think DCU is doing R now. So if any of the coding nerds are there, you're doing R, and I think maybe Python. I'm not fully sure, and I can't fully remember now myself. But then as you go on in the years, you're definitely your maths gets more tailored towards the actuarial job, if that makes sense. So
Hmm.
all the maths that you've learned, so you've learned calculus, you've learned probability, you've learned statistics, and you're probably like, why the hell am I learning this? But then when you go into second and third year, you're getting it applied to actual actuarial functions, if that makes sense. So I definitely say to anyone in first year, you're like, I don't understand. Like, if you completed first year, like, I still don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what this is. You're like, well, no one did actually. So once you get into second year and third year, you end up like saying, oh, this is why we learned this because this is how we do this. If that makes sense. And then in third year, you have your interplacement. I know so that's basically from January till the end of summer. So that would be your second semester of third year and the whole of summer. So that's basically like where you definitely get to apply all this maths you've learned into an actual workplace environment. And definitely for me after that, like, because even up till the third year now, so I've been studying this course for 3 years, still hadn't a full clue of what was actually being asked me, if that makes sense. But once you got into the work environment and you were like, and you got a couple of months into it, it does take a couple of months to get used to it, but once you're into it, you're like, oh, now I understand why I had to learn this random stuff, like in relation to calculus. Sorry, with the curse there nearly. And
We could
then
beep it out.
yeah, and then apply that, and then again in fourth year, then once you come back from work placement, you definitely like it's definitely like down to actual actuarial concepts, and it's so much easier to learn once you've had the work placement because you can apply what you've like what you've done in work. You're like, oh, I understand why I'm learning this. And I think that's the main thing for actuarial maths. It's like definitely, it's probably one of the hardest courses in DCU, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to put anybody off. It's definitely the most time consuming one. But once you get into the stage of you finally understand why you're doing everything, it becomes a lot easier to learn it, if that makes sense. And you're happy to do it then. But it definitely like, so like, it does take a while to get your foot into the door, and like, don't be like, if you're not liking it after a month or two, I would say, well, wait a year till you finally understand what's happening, and then you probably come to realize, like, that was definitely it for me, if that makes sense. Like, once I finally realized what it meant, then I liked it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and that's a great piece of advice, and a very good example as to why we run these webinars with graduates or current students. It's because, like, what would you have liked to have known going into it? Okay, you would like to have known that first year can be general, second year can be general. You might be questioning, when is the thing that I want to happen? Like, when is that going to occur? But in a lot of courses in DCU, you do have to start off general, because bearing in mind, like, most students are coming from you know, not having been to college before. So you really need to get those basic understandings before you can progress into doing the fancy things.
Yeah.
So it's great to know that. Can I be nosy and ask more about your intra? What sort of jobs were you doing on your intra? Because there's often a misconception that internships, it's like you'll be making coffee and you'll be printing. But in DCU, like, it really, like, these are internships and you have real responsibilities and you're dealing with, in your case, probably real money and real people. So what was that like? Stress aside.
Yeah, sure. Sometimes I wish I was making coffee nearly, but no, it was definitely it was. So I basically had my placement in Irish Life, and that's actually where I got my job from. So I actually have got employed from my work placement. And like, it's definitely a hands-on approach. Like, I think a lot, the actuarial community is actually quite small, if that makes sense. So like, everybody that you're working with has been to college themselves and have done your course or have done a similar course in another college. So everybody like understands each other, and like, everybody knows what like you can do. Everybody knows that, like, if you've been to the third year of actuarial maths, you're smart enough to handle certain situations. Like, so they're not making you take notes at meetings, well, actually they do, but like, that everybody has to do that. But you're definitely being applied. Like, for me, I was working within one company of Irish Life, and like, we were dealing with basically like actually I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, but
Yeah, whatever.
we were dealing with a lot of stuff, like, to do with like tax, to do with investments, to do with policy holders. So like, for me, actually, then there's this thing called commission. So you will get used to commission, anyone who's an actuary. And like, I actually got put on as the actuary lead in this after 3 months. So like, I had my work placement, and then for the last 5 months, I actually was the lead actuary, and actually turns out on this project. So like, you're definitely, and even talking to my friends, like, because a lot of people get employed in Irish Life for the work placement, and every other company, like, it's definitely like, you're not there to socialize. If that makes, you are there to socialize, but you're definitely there to like learn it. And like, everybody coming back, this is the one thing that I did notice. Everybody coming back into fourth year knew what they wanted to do then, if
Okay.
that makes sense. Where before intra or before your work placement, you're sitting there kind of like, "Oh, I don't know where I want to go, what I want to do," if that makes sense. But as soon as you're done, you know you like it. The majority of us did enjoy it, like, and a lot of us, most of us are employed now as an actuary. There's some people who's moved over to like investments or something like that, which is very similar. So like, you're definitely on the same path, and you're definitely like, yeah, I've never made a coffee once when I was there. Maybe someone made a coffee for me nearly. That's how much work you're
Yeah.
given.
Yeah, it's just nice to hear from students that really had like real responsibilities, and you get that experience, because otherwise there's no point in doing it, really, is there? If you're just going to arrive back and not know anything extra, you know, what's the point
Yeah,
in it? And a
definitely.
great point that you mentioned as well is actually establishing what you like and what you dislike, because better you find out during, you know, an 8-month internship than, you know, signing a 2-year contract somewhere and then going,
Exactly. Yeah.
oh, I actually don't really like this. So, you know, for someone who's maybe anxious about an internship, like, sure, just try, you know, it's only, the longest it's ever going to be is a year in DCU, and then, you know, you're back to college. So it's an opportunity more so than something to be scared of.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, it's maybe a bit thrown in the deep end in terms of like, hey, you step into the workforce and you've never done it before, but that's how you learn. And then, as you
Oh,
mentioned as
definitely.
well, it starts to kind of tie up. You're going, oh, that's why I learned that thing. Oh, this, and you see it in action, because sometimes it's hard in college to really, as you said, join the dots as to why you're doing this thing altogether.
Definitely.
just say for anyone who's joined, there is that Q&A function if you want to ask Fergal anything in particular about the course. While people are maybe having a think, you mentioned that this is one of the busiest kind of courses that you can do in DCU, yet you still manage to be really involved in college life. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Just I suppose to show students that you can be at a super busy course and also get involved in outside of lectures.
Definitely, and to be honest with you, I'd say you have to nearly, just with the course it is. I know, speaking to a few of the people who finished up in college who didn't get involved in other stuff, like, so they only were involved with the actuarial course, like their college experience like wasn't memorable to them, if that makes sense. Because like, I'm not trying to put anybody off, but like when you're studying actuary, you have about 30 hours of lectures a week, if not more, and you're in the library from week 6 onwards studying. So like, you have about 5 exams every semester, if not more. And like you're definitely like, you're under pressure. You really are under pressure. Like, and it's because like it is a difficult job, and like you do get compensated for it when you like leave, but like you do have to put the work in yourself. And like you're not even qualified when you're only half qualified basically when you finish college, and that's in every college. Like, so you have to do work based. Well, sorry, I go back. So for me, then I got heavily involved in a lot of societies. So there actually is an actuarial. It's called the FAMSOC, so it's financial and actuarial mathematics, because there's two kind of courses very similar to each other, who are outside, and that's really good because all of the 4 years are part of that, if that makes sense. So if you're a first year, you get to talk to the 3rd and 4th years, and like you do get to hear their opinions as well. And in all fairness, like these are the people you're going to be working with in a few years' time. So like just because you're a first year now, in 5 or 6 years' time, you're going to be working at the same level as a person who was in 4th year and you thought they were like miles ahead of you, but you're in the same level. And then I got heavily involved in DCU LGBTA. Probably the thing is, I actually think about this later. When someone asks me what do I think about when I think about college, I think about LGBTA. Like I forget nearly that I studied in college, even though I was studying non-stop in college, because like it just was what I found most interesting. I really, that's where most of my friends come from, is from LGBTA. They're doing DC Drag Race tomorrow if anybody wants to buy a ticket.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that. I'll definitely
but,
have to tune
yeah,
in.
but no, it was definitely a major thing for me. And I would definitely suggest to anybody, like it doesn't have to be LGBTA or even the actuarial stock, but like find a stock. I think there's 140, 150 clubs and societies in DC. You can find something that you enjoy. And I would definitely tell anybody that you probably do need it to get a break from DCU, because if you just keep going to DCU, going into the lecture halls or going to the library and you do nothing else, you grow to not like it. You grow to not, and like who would like it? Because like that's tough work. But if you have something else separate in DCU, it makes your life so much easier. And like honestly, like when people ask me, I studied so much every day, most of the time for the 4 years, and honestly, I've completely forgot about that because of the clubs and societies part of DCU, or like the social aspect of it. And like, just so to give everybody a heads up, like once you're done your last exam, obviously like every year, the actuaries, like we're like the last ones in the library, because our last exam is always the last day of the 2 weeks of exams, and we take over New Bar, with the student bar there, and we have the best time ever. And honestly, like it's worth it in the end. Like, and you grow some friendships in the library because you just see everybody else suffering as much as you studying. So as soon as you see someone else study, like you just have this bond with people, and you'll never get over it. But no, definitely, like I would tell people you're doing college wrong if you're not doing something else other than your actual college course. If that makes sense.
You're dead right. And it makes for a lovely break, as you mentioned, between whether it's study sessions or a night off. And you want to enjoy that experience. And even though, you know, your exams obviously are very important, and getting your degree is priority, but you'll become a much well-rounded person by doing these other things, and making those connections and getting experience doing something, in your case, that isn't just maths, you know?
Definitely. And can I just add on that now, actually, just for after that? I like the few interviews I had for my intro and then for like my actual job, like you're going in as just as good as everybody else when it comes to college. Like if anyone who's survived actuarial maths in college, everybody knows you're good at that, if that makes sense. You need something else to like, so the majority of the time, my interview would be like 30 minutes long, and 20 minutes I'd be talking about clubs and societies in DCU, if that makes sense, and how I got involved in that. And like the, they say, oh, you might even say, oh yeah, I see you're past your exams. don't even mention exams because they see that in the CV already. They don't care if you got there, that's fine, but you need something else to say like, oh, I'm also sociable.
Exactly. And it's about differentiating yourself because, as you mentioned, whether it's actuarial maths, whether it's business engineering, whatever course you do, there are going to be hundreds of other people probably graduating with that degree, be it from DCU alone or from a combination of other
Definitely.
universities. And having that club and society involvement or committee, anything like that, will give you just something to make you different and you can talk about. And as you said, you're social, you have communication skills, those kind of transferable skills that you can't really teach. Like you can't learn that by sitting in a lecture. You actually have to go out and do things. Just before we finish up, guys, just remember there is that Q&A function if you do want to ask Fergal anything in particular. Can I ask, just before we're finishing up, in terms of the direction that you took throughout the course, did you kind of enter the course knowing that you wanted to work where you're working now, or did that kind of change as the years went on?
Yeah, no, I had no notion. Honest to God, I was as clueless as anybody coming into college. I had no idea what was going on. I remember when the lecturer, like our course coordinator, first spoke to us to start talking to us about the actuarial exams. And I honestly was sitting there being like, what are they? I literally hadn't a clue. Like I was so out of the blue. Like I just wanted to go to DCU. That was my thing. And I wanted to do maths. And this happened to be the two things joined together. So, and like even at that, like people, like the amount of people, and I want to say, I did want to say this before we finish up, but like, don't be afraid to put it down. You can change so easily in college. If you don't like it, you can change. It is a very easy thing to do. Like I know a lot of the actuaries in first year switched over to accounting and finance in DCU quite quickly. And like it was, I think it was like submitting in one form. It was very easy to do. So like don't be afraid to try it. I would definitely say go for more towards these kind of courses than go towards art courses. I think arts is very too broad. You need to narrow it down and go from there. But that's just my own opinion. But no, definitely like I'd say honestly, I'd say like if I had been in my workplace and had been in a different company, I probably would have ended up going probably to that company.
Hmm.
But like because right now as an actuary, like basically I'm only half qualified as an actuary at the minute. So like you still have 3 or 4 more years of where you have to do work placement basically and exams at the same time. So after them 4 years, you're gonna know an awful lot more about the actual industry for actuaries. So then that's when you'll start making like your actual like this is my career choice. So like right now I can go wherever nearly at the minute. Like,
Hmm.
but after a few years, I'll probably have to decide. But at the minute, I'm very happy with life insurance. But like you can easily move to general insurance, you can move to investments, you can move to banking, anything to do with money and anything to do with the risk of losing money and actually can be employed there. And even if you want to become a lecturer, it's very easy to or even a teacher. I think we actually have. I think you might only have to do like a small degree extra, like maybe a 6 month degree to actually become a teacher because we actually have all the math skills to be a secondary school teacher
Hmm.
already. So like it's very easy to switch about. But no, I definitely only my workplace and kind of taught me what I wanted to do for the time being. And don't be afraid to change. That's one of the big things. Like it's so easy to change. And like don't think that your first choice in your CEO is going to change your life because it doesn't have to change your life. And if you don't like it, you can switch. If you don't like DCU, you can switch colleges. If you want to stay in DCU and try a different course, it's very easy to do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then whether you're interested in, as Fergus said, transferring a course once you get in, it can kind of depend on places available and grades and stuff. But like it is an option for people, or equally like if you're thinking about doing a PLC in something, like there's often different routes that you can go to get where you want to be. And even when you get into college, you might know exactly the path that you want to take, but that's okay, and you'll figure it out along the way. So, I mean, you've covered so many kind of tips and great pieces of advice before we go. Any kind of one that you'll just say again for any student, one bit of advice for a sixth year at the minute who's maybe considering actuarial maths?
Yeah, you have to like maths. Very, but yeah, honestly, don't be afraid. I hadn't a clue what actuarial maths was until I came into it, and honestly, until the end of fourth year, I didn't know really what it was. And I'm really grateful that I did stick with it, if that makes sense. I know a lot of the first few months, you're like, it is because in school, obviously, you have more than one subject, if that makes sense. So just because you like maths in school, that's because you're only doing it like for 6 or 7 classes a week, if that makes sense. But when you go into
Mm,
college, you're doing it maths constantly. You're doing maths, like different types of maths, obviously, but like it is a different situation. And I think, especially for if you are going into an actuary, you're going to see a lot of courses who like maybe don't even have lectures some days, and you're sitting there from 9 to 5, Monday to Thursday, doing your stuff and everybody else is having a good time. And don't get me wrong, we do have a good time too, but you're just like, oh, this is not what college life's supposed to be like. But it's up to yourself to make it the most of it. But I would definitely just keep at it. And I'd say after a year, if you didn't like it, then start thinking about it. But like if you don't like it after 2 weeks, I think you really do have to give it a longer time than that. And yeah, the intro placement in DCU is brilliant. Everybody got an intro placement, and the majority of us got our actual jobs from our intro placement, if not all of us. And I think actuaries, even during this whole COVID crisis, every single one of us in our course is already employed. So like it's a very employable job as well. So that's the practical side of it.
For sure. So love maths, be prepared to work hard, but you'll also, I imagine, reap the benefits once you have and your internship and you've graduated and everything. Just before you go, Fergal, do you have, and I asked Deirdre the same question earlier, one core memory from your time in DCU that you'd like to share?
Yeah, probably it was probably with LGBTA, to be honest with you. Last year, it was actually happening this week now as well. There was this thing called Rainbow Week. So Rainbow Week is actually happening in DCU as we speak. And so what day is today? Wednesday. So tomorrow actually would have been actually it's DCU Drag Race tomorrow as well. I'm not trying to sell it again, but like I was up on the stage and I was introducing everybody, and like we had raised money, and like it was in the venue in DCU. So like it's like this like really cool venue that's only been built quite recently, and like it was just entirely packed out, and the drag shows is amazing, and like that whole night is probably like my one, like that way like you have your memories of like the best night out. That was probably my best night, even though like I literally was working until like 11 o'clock trying to sure everything's went, but as soon as it was over, it was just the best experience. But yeah, no, like LGBTQA definitely if something like is the one thing I remember about DCU.
Yeah.
Like I honestly can't remember college, like the actual the study inside of it, even though like you thought you'd never forget how hard it was. But like as soon as you have something else, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's nice to hear, and especially when sometimes the best memories aren't necessarily related to the course, because it just backs it even further that it's so important to get involved kind of outside, and the course is one part of that jigsaw, but really there's so many pieces that go into like creating a very memorable and fun college experience. But that brings us up right to 5 o'clock. Fergal, thank you so much for this talk. For anyone watching back, if you have any questions, let us know through the email that you got this link from today for the Zoom, studenthelp@dcu.ie. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions. Fergal, thank you so much again for your time. It was lovely to speak to you, and I'd say we'll have a surge now in actuarial maths applications after this talk.
Hopefully I haven't put everybody off.
No commission though, unfortunately. Thanks a million, Fergal. I'll talk to you soon, and see everybody next week. Bye.